What's up, bro amigos? Welcome to another episode of FPC Friday. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving, doing what it is ever that you do. Hopefully you had some good time with family, or a good time rail fanning, or a good time working on the model railroad layout, or whatever it is that keeps you entertained. Obviously, I think trains probably keep you entertained if you are watching this, or maybe not. Maybe you stumbled on this by accident. But anyways, I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I hope the holidays are treating y'all well. So on this particular day, this Monday before Thanksgiving, I decided to make a trip up to the southern end of Jacksonville because I've been trying to hunt 905 on this Bayard Industrial Lead. As you can see here, it's pretty neat. The Industrial Lead goes through this parking lot and around a couple of other industries. And when I came up here this morning, I was pleasantly surprised to see an old Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe boxcar still in the Santa Fe waffle logo, or as most people, normal people call it, the circle cross logo. I'm just weird. I call it the waffle logo because that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of a waffle. As you can see here, any of you have ever made your own waffles, that looks like a waffle logo. So I call it the Santa Fe waffle logo. Other people call it the circle cross. Those people are probably more normal than I am. It is what it is. But to see an ATSF car, especially over in Florida, in this good condition, besides the graffiti, I think it's pretty rare. But I also found another one that had a bigger waffle logo the previous week, and I think I posted about it. I'm not sure. Anyways, you can see that they're parked here along with some of these refrigerator cars, and so that led me to believe that maybe 905 would come this morning to service them. However, I got there probably around like 8:15 in the morning, and it was still pretty foggy, as you can see from this shot, and I didn't hear anything going on, so I decided to do some exploring along that line to see what spots I should film from, to see what the best angles were. And as you can see, there's a spur here behind this other industrial building. This, I don't believe, gets serviced by the FECA. I think it used to. But from what I've been looking on the maps, right now it's listed, well, one map listed as a Scholastic bookstore or something like that. But then again, the industrial building at the very end on one map is listed as a winery. On another map is listed as an auto parts building. So one of them is wrong. I don't know which one it is, but from what I've gathered from other rail fans, I think it's now a winery, or at least a wine distribution or beverage distribution facility. As you can see here on this scene, you can see there's also a industrial spur for a chemical plant. I believe it's Allied Universal. I don't know exactly what chemicals they're actually putting in place here. I didn't look up the placards before we got here. So I ended up sitting there for about 2 hours before I didn't hear anything. So I decided to go check the main line because I figured either 202 or 204 would be coming up soon. And so as I came up here to check the signals, I see that there was reds in both directions, which was unusual. And then finally, my patience paid off, and I could see a headlight coming down from Jacksonville. And lo and behold, it's 905. My favorite people to stalk. So as we can see here, 905 is taking the siding with the Bayard Industrial Lead right in front of us. So a reasonable and prudent person would believe that 905 was taking the siding to service the Bayard Industrial Lead. However, that person would be wrong, and that person would be me. And so, however, 905 would actually be taking the siding because it'd be meeting the northbound 202 or 204 that was coming up through St. Augustine at the moment. And so it would be taking the siding to let them pass into Bowden Yard. However, I do think 905 was going to service the Bayard Industrial Lead today. However, it was definitely not the first stop on the list. So while I was disappointed that he wasn't servicing the Bayard Industrial Lead at the moment, he would be servicing it later. However, I was not able to get that on film as I would have to get ready for work. 905 would come to a stop on the siding shortly after clearing the crossing. As you can see in the distance, there is not one but 4 red lights indicating that the track ahead is occupied and not clear to proceed. However, also notice on the back of that last Warner Hopper car is there an unknown species of animal. I don't know if it's a duck or if it's a mushroom or if it's a pirate duck mushroom. Anyways, while I tried to figure that out, the dispatcher made a change to the signals, and now we can see that there's a high ball or high green indicating for the northbound to roll on through. And shortly after that, we can see the northbound's headlights in the distance. Now, before the northbound could even clear the crossing, 905 had already vacated the siding, was hightailing it south to St. Augustine, where we would catch it next here on the old main line to Palaca. This is now a branch line, it is called the Wilburt Wright Industrial Lead. However, back in the day, this used to be the original main line. As the line came south out of Jacksonville to St. Augustine, it hung to the southwest, headed towards Palaca, before curving back around to the southeast and heading towards Bunnell. In 1925, they made the Moultrie cutoff. I'll put a map here. And so this line became redundant. And so in 1972, the southern portion of this old main line was trimmed back to Palaca. And then in 1988, the rest of it was abandoned up to this point where you can see here on camera. This line is serviced every week. I'm not sure if it's every day or every other day. However, one of the main customers on this line is Titan Block and Concrete. So FEC brings in loads for them to turn into concrete, and they also bring in box cars for them to ship the concrete blocks out on. So as you will see in a few minutes, when the 905 crew goes to service this industry, not only will they drop off a couple Werner hopper cars, but they'll also drop off a box car. So obviously the facility uses the material out of the hopper cars to make the concrete blocks, but then they'll also package the concrete blocks on the pallets and load the box cars full of the blocks. And so the next time FEC comes out to pull out the empties, they will also pull out the loaded box car for shipping. And so what I've also noticed is FEC services this facility enough that even if the facility is not done with their loads from the previous trip, the FEC will bring some more loads and then take out what is empty, and then the box cars as well. As I previously mentioned, this was the old main line to Balaka, which got trimmed back in 1988. Now this section of track was also technically out of service until about 2001 when some customers finally came back online. Now the end of track is about 100 yards behind the camera, and it just ends into some tall grass before it turns into the concrete rails to trail. Now when they rehab the track, I guess they didn't feel the need to put a Y in, so what ends up happening is the 905 crew will come in with their cut of cars. They'll disconnect here on, I guess what you could say was the old main, and then they will go to the very end of the track, which can fit about a locomotive or two. They will throw the switch, run around their train, get back onto the branch line main, and then they'll connect to their train from the rear, and they will sort out the cars as need be, either pulling out the empties first or putting the loads in, depending on what it calls for that day. And so once they finish their switching duties, they will run around their train again, put the locomotive back on the front, and what the conductor will do is he'll get on the rear car and they'll do a long shove move back towards the Moultrie cutoff. A lot of times they will actually leave some cars at the Moultrie cutoff, and which is what they did on this particular day. So what's going to end up happening is they will do a long shove move back. Unfortunately, I was not able to film that on this particular day due to me having some adulting obligations, aka a job that I had to get to. But we will still watch them do some switching maneuvers and watch them take out some loads, put the empty boxcar in, put the loads back in, and then pull one empty Hortner hopper cars. Now, if you're listening closely, you can hear what sounds like a generator sound. That is the Thermo King freezer units that are on the 3 waffle reefer cars, the BNSF waffle logo cars. I believe those are actually destined for that Bayard Industrial Lead. Unfortunately for me, I miscalculated. I thought that 905 would serve that Industrial Lead first. However, I was wrong, and so they came down here to service this line first, and I believe on their way back to Jacksonville, they are going to drop those 3 waffle reefers and a boxcar off at that winery up there off the Bayard Industrial Lead. One of these days I'll catch it. Unfortunately, like I said, on this particular day I had to get to work, so I was unfortunately not able to finish 9 to 5's work for today, but I promise I'll get to it as soon as I can. So you're probably looking at the scene wondering, hey, wait a minute, I thought you said they were bringing loads in. Why are they taking loads out? Well, as I mentioned before, they service this industry often enough that the industry is often not done with the loads from the previous run. And so they're usually constantly bringing more loads in. However, because of where the cinder blocks loading area is, they need to put those box cars at the very end of the spur. So they have to take the loads out that are kind of blocking them in. And so they first have to take the old loads out, connect them to the new loads, which are also connected to the empty box cars. And so they have it ranged in a way so that when they put it back in, the box cars are at the very end and they'll go in first, which, as you can see on the map, they'll put them at the very end of the spur where they do load the cinder blocks in, and then it will keep the loads in the area where they can unload them. So with the empty box cars and the loads now dropped in on the spur, they had one empty Ordner hopper car to pull out. They'll attach this Ordner hopper car at the very end of those waffle reefers, as the Ordner hopper car has a great platform for the conductor to ride on. So after they connect the empty to the end of those reefer cars, the locomotive will back up, get back on the siding, run back around the train, come back to where we are, and then hook back up to the front of these reefer cars. And the conductor will end up riding on the back of the Ordner hopper car and be a guide for the long shove back towards Moultrie Junction. Now, as I mentioned before, I had to leave shortly after this. However, I do have other shots from previous runs where they did this long shove move, so I'm going to put those in here so that y'all can kind of get a complete picture of what a normal job on this line is like. So once they get back to Moultrie Junction, they have to hook up back with the rest of their train. They usually only take what is needed to service the Titan block and concrete. So once they get back here, they hook up to the rest of their train, and that usually ends up encompassing blocking Rodriguez Street, as we can see here. So it will take time for them to pump up the air. The conductor will then walk over towards the switch. He'll align the switch from the main, make sure the crossing gates are working for Palmer Street, and then once they get the go-ahead, they will back out onto the main, and then the conductor will throw the switch again, and they'll start heading south. They still have further customers to serve on their way south, with their southernmost customer being the Vulcan Materials Complex over in Bunnell. Bunnell is normally their southernmost point of work. Anything below that is normally serviced by the local 910 out of New Smyrna Beach, but every once in a while they will go down towards Ormond Beach. There's the hardwood siding down there, and so sometimes if there's traffic needs to come back up north from the local 910, they will leave cars there, and so 905 will sometimes come down to that siding, which is over by Favoretta, and they'll pick up cars from there and then head back north. Then usually after they service Bunnell, they'll head back towards Jacksonville. I think on this day with the reefers, they will service the Bayard Industrial Lead on their way back. However, as I said before, I had to go to my adult obligation called a job, and so I was unfortunate to be able to catch that on video for y'all this time, but I will do better.